was an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Novice by Trudy Canavan, chapters 17, 18, and 19. Brought to you by Ashleigh. In these chapters, shit really hit the fan like a lot sooner than I expected it to. Like a lot. And I want to know what the fuck happened with Lorlen. Lorlen? Buddy? You alright? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode. So a lot happens before we actually get to the shit hitting the fan. But of course, that was what I wanted to mention in the intro. I would like to register my satisfaction, however, that Tyend is gay like I suspected, and that there is a little bit of romance brewing for Sonea that doesn't have to do with anyone who's still at school or like even Sari. You know, I feel a little bad for the guy because he's a nice dude and I want him to have some good things happen to him. But I like the fact that she is getting involved with somebody who's of a higher class and who's also into magic. I just feel like there is going to come a point with people like Sari that you're not going to have enough in common with them and your life is just going to be so different that I don't know how you come back from that after a point. All right, so I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let us back up and go back to chapter 17, titled A Capable Companion. I don't think I read the titles on these chapters usually, but they don't really make much of an impression on me usually. So this is when Dorian first arrives. And apparently there's been this really bad cold snap happening. Everything is covered with snow and ice. And he comes up and is obviously a little bit of a show off. He shows off here in the way that he makes his entrance, and he shows off later when he's levitating up the stairs instead of walking up the stairs. And I was not sure at first. And it's hard because in this book, I'm not sure if the author hasn't given me good indicators of how old people are, or if I just haven't kept track. But for some reason, I have it in my head that Dorian and Daniel are around the same age. Which doesn't make sense, but I had that in my head, and so later on when Daniel's talking about this anonymous novice who was gay and kind of used to wreck Daniel's reputation, I thought it was going to be Dorian. So imagine my surprise when Dorian kisses Sonea, because I had initially thought, oh, I think maybe there's something there between the two of them, Dorian and Sonea. But after hearing Daniel's story, I was like, maybe I'm wrong, because it would make sense if it was somebody that we knew. And then come to find out that, well, I mean, I guess he could be bi, but it sounds like whatever the person that Daniel was associating with was only gay. Who knows? So I like this. It was when Dorian was at his most charming that he reminded Rothen of his deceased wife. The boy had also inherited Yalara's almost obsessive dedication to healing. So I like the fact that we've got a male healer, and I love that later on when he's talking about it with Sonea, that he really clearly believes that this is really one of the only worthwhile ways to use magic. To him, you do need to know how to defend yourself, and you do need to know how to create things, but helping people and keeping them healthy is to him like of paramount importance, and not just people, but he heals animals also, like, which is going to be hugely important to farmers, and even if you just have a pet, you know, like that's something that's important to people. So I feel like Dorian has a really clear motivation, and it speaks well of him. So he's just, you know, I think it's, Rothen thinks a few times about how charming he is. And he clearly is. Like, he's an intelligent kid. I keep calling him a kid, like he's a grown-ass man. But he's a kid to me, because I think he's supposed to be like, 20 maybe? And he obviously makes a good impression on Sonea, who like doesn't get involved in the conversation right away. But she gives him what is described as an appraising look. And I feel like that means that she's sort of like, not bad, actually. So, yeah, they have just a little small talk about best and worst times of year to travel. And really, it turns out that there's not like a good time of year. And then he does the showing off with the disc of energy for levitating up the stairs. And Rothen, like, mentally kind of gives him a little shit about it. Just like, oh, really? Really? You're just gonna... Okay. And she winds up going off by herself to study. And he has a very short conversation with his dad about how fragile looking she is. And how much smaller she is. I think that, you know, when you think of somebody who has lived a rough life, a lot of times we're tempted to think of somebody who's like physically brawny. But if you're, you know, imagining somebody who grew up in poverty, a lot of times they won't have had good nutrition, and that leads to being stunted in growth, just like as a child, and then they're very small because they don't have enough to eat. We have a sort of a different thing now where cheap food is loaded with calories. So an indicator that somebody might live in poverty is them being overweight rather than being thin, because they can only afford garbage food that puts a lot of like empty weight on. So that's fun. Anyway, so he says, Rothen says, I was hoping you might distract her a little. All she's thought about since summer is study and her problems with the other novices. The glint of humor flared into life again in Dorian's eyes. Distract her? I think I can do that. So he does that. Take that to heart. So then let's go to Daniel. He and Tayend are out in the streets at this harvest festival in Vindo. Now, this was all kinds of surprising to me, and all right, I'm getting ahead of myself. I keep doing that, like wanting to talk about the end first. But so they have to climb up these crazy, like, winding staircases, and these Tayend is like really out of breath and has to stop and tells Daniel to go on, and I think he's buying some wine and that he'll catch up with him. And Daniel is in the middle of his purchase when he looks up and sees somebody like grab Tayend out of the crowd and yank him against the wall. And Daniel's like inside the shop and looking out the window, and he goes outside and just says over the guy's shoulder, because Tayend can see Daniel, he tells him, just give it to him, because the guy's mugging him. I didn't understand this. Why didn't Daniel just step in right here? He could easily have prevented this whole thing. Like, he says if Tayend gave up his money, the man would simply take it and go. And I'm like, yeah, and I get that you, like, want to cause less trouble, but, like, this is a guy who's holding a knife to your friend and will hold the knife to other people and maybe hurt somebody else. Like, take this guy out of the fucking equation, buddy. Like, you don't need to kill him, but at the very least you could draw attention or hold him Lord knows that they have enough magic to hold people still and call the cops. But instead he tells Tyann to cooperate, which I just found really strange. So the mugger, Tyann decides to cooperate. The mugger grabs the money and then stabs him anyway, and is about to stab him a second time when Daniel finally steps in and throws him. Now, all I can say here is that I think the only reason the author didn't have Daniel step in earlier was because she needed Tyann to be injured so that we could have this healing moment. Which just doesn't make sense to me. Daniel is not going to let this guy, get mugged. I just don't buy it. So this scene bothered me a lot in the way that it was initiated. But he shoves this guy in reaction to his friend getting stabbed harder than intended and winds up killing him. It turns out, luckily, that the cops in this area, the guards, are all just kind of like, oh yeah, this is a bad dude though, so you killed him, what are you gonna do? And really, they just let it go, which I found sort of amusing in a dark way. But Daniel doesn't have time to even notice what he's done to the mugger, because after throwing him, he immediately kneels down next to Tyann and begins to heal him. And he hears in his head, perhaps he won't see. No, it's too late. He's probably seen already. Now he'll reject me. Keralian magicians are like that. They think we're perverted, unnatural. But no, he'll understand. He says he knows what it's like. But he's not a lad himself. Or is he? He could be hiding it. No, he couldn't be. He's a Keralian magician. Their healers would have detected it and thrown him out. So Daniel pulls back and kind of blocks himself from reading any more of what Tyann is saying, but obviously has picked up on what it is, which is that Tyann is gay, and he doesn't talk to him about it until way later. It's such an awkward, but I love this moment where he's thinking about some moments of interest, I guess is the best way to say it, that have happened over the past month. Tyann had found a pair of leeches entwined around each other and a rope. A sailor had noticed Tyann's interest. They breed, the man said. Which is the boy and which is the girl? Tyann asked. Not boy or girl. Same. Tyann's brows rose as he glanced at the sailor. Really? The man moved away to collect a pan of CO. Tyann looked up at the leeches. Good for you, he'd said, which I found so funny. Good for you, leeches. And then he thinks about the fact that that when they got to oh my god, I can't remember the name of the town, that they saw somebody who was being killed, for being gay, and that it fucked him up so bad. Lonmar. I don't know why I can't ever remember. I remember Vindo pretty well. I think because it reminds me of Vindaloo, which is a good food. But, obviously he just thought that seeing somebody being tormented and tortured and whipped and whatever was enough to fuck this guy up, which it would be for anyone. But it turns out that there's the added bonus of the fact that the man is being punished for something that Tyann is also, quote, guilty of. And it's just such a shame, I find it really interesting that the author is dealing with this subject matter, because it's so unexpected in this, universe. This doesn't need to be it's just not really. So I'm wondering what motivated her to include this in the story, and if it's something that's personal to her. Is she gay? Does she know somebody who was who was targeted because they were gay, or is it just, and is she thought it was interesting to have the representation, or what? But I'm curious to see how this is going to play out. And Daniel then realizes that he's killed the mugger, and kind of doesn't know how to react to it. He just kind of shivers a little bit, realizing that he has never killed anyone before now. And I feel like this is probably the best. If you're going to kill someone, having the kill be in defense of your friend is probably best case scenario, right? And he realizes that the whole reason that Tyen was resisting healing magic is because for some reason Tyen thinks that the healing magic is going to detect that he's what they call a lad. Being gay is called a lad, which I find sort of endearing. I kind of like it. Because in his mind, it would be detected by healers as it is an abnormality and something wrong with you, which is just like the most heartbreaking fucking thing. And it comes as quite a surprise to him when he talks about it with Daniel later. And Daniel knows, but not because he detected it. It was just because Tyen was like thinking it so fucking loudly that Daniel couldn't help but hear it. Which, you know, Tyen's a little bit embarrassed about. But yeah, so Tyen, I'm just going to deal with like this whole thing right now. Tyen had been pretty good at magic, and his father had considered sending him to the guild and was like intending to do that. And Tyen knew that he was gay and didn't want to go because he realized that this was going to be a problem. That, you know, he could be kicked out, and if his preferences were made known publicly enough for him to be kicked out of school because of it, which was certainly possible, then it would also be public enough to shame his father, which could lead to a lot of unfortunate repercussions for his family. So, and at first, his father, like, doesn't understand why he doesn't want to go. But it seems like later on, as his father's, like, kind of watching him, he starts to realize, like, what's really going on. And that's part of the reason why Tyen went and worked at the, you know, huge library, is because he's able to get away from his family and be around a lot of other like-minded people, which he has mentioned before, that the court of Eileen is just a lot more, like, tolerant of things. So, yeah, it's really sad because he has all of this potential that Daniel can sense, magically speaking. All of this potential of power and ability, and he's never going to be trained and be able to take advantage of that because of who he is attracted to. And that's just going to, like, completely cut off his whole, you know, pursuing that whole path in his life, which is just, it's a huge bummer. And Daniel even has to, like, consider whether or not to stay friends with Tyen, which Tyen thinks that Daniel's going to reject him because Daniel is intolerant. But what it really is that Daniel feels so acutely the restoration of his own damaged reputation, that the fact that people finally believe that those rumors were just rumors is something that he doesn't really want to give up. And he feels like if it becomes known that Tyen is a lad, and then everybody realizes that Daniel is hanging out with Tyen an awful lot, all of that's going to get brought back up again, and everybody's going to assume that he's with Tyen, which is a reasonable, like, leap to make. I can understand why he feels that way. It's just, and he's ashamed of himself for thinking of abandoning his friend for those kinds of reasons. But, you know, like, you do have to consider that kind of thing, especially when you live somewhere that it could be literally dangerous for you. And finally, he just comes to the conclusion that, like, him and Tyen have been traveling together for, like, a month. And if somebody's going to make some conclusions about their relationship, it's pretty much too late. So he decides that he's going to continue being friends with him, and he's not going to, like, you know, reveal his secret or anything. It's just, it really came down to the question of whether or not he was going to stay friends with this person. And I know I said from the beginning, like when I was thinking about Daniel, that I just assumed Daniel was gay. I really did. Like, I don't know where that came from. And we haven't heard anything in his mind except for his denials because of the rumors. But we've never heard him think, oh, that's a really beautiful woman, or that's a very good looking man. There's never been anything sexual about any of his thoughts. And we have not heard any sort of ambition for marriage or any sort of relationship from him at all. So I remain in the Daniel might actually be gay after all camp. And that maybe that was what Fergan like decided to bully him about, because Fergan was able to see something about Daniel that Daniel had not yet come to terms with. Because that's an unfortunate thing that can happen. That I definitely saw that happen in my high school. There was a kid that got bullied when he was a freshman, and everybody called him gay, and he denied it and denied it. And then sophomore year, he came out and was like, you know what? Actually, you're right. I am gay. And once he came out, actually, it was a really like pleasant, like, did he still get made fun of by some guys? Absolutely. It was not like all roses and cream, but people were very accepting, and he had a very tight circle of friends that were very protective around him. So it worked out for him in the end. But I don't know, like, if Daniel is just kind of, maybe I could imagine if I had sexual attractions and I knew that those attractions were going to be a problem for me, and that they had already been a problem even before I kind of realized they were there, I could see myself just trying to shut down any sexual impulse that I had at all in order to avoid dealing with it in any way, and just kind of going like celibate. And I think that it would be a failed attempt, and that in the end, I might wind up hurting myself or others, but I could see that being like one way that I would cope with it initially if I didn't really know what to do. And so I wonder if the fact that I don't know anything about Daniel's like feelings towards either sex or his desire for a relationship is a purposeful move on the author's part to let me fill in my own blanks, because he doesn't really know himself either, you know? So anyway, I probably spent way too much time talking about that, but I just found it really interesting the way that Canavan has decided to bring this into the story and deal with it. And I like the fact that even if Daniel isn't gay, that the episode at, you know, when he was a novice, of being targeted and almost kicked out for just being suspected, I really like that he is really empathetic to Tyann's situation. Like, at the very least, he understands what Tyann could have faced if he had gone to the school, and isn't trying to say, like, well, you could have just gone and hidden it. Like, he probably couldn't have just gone and hidden it. He probably couldn't have. And even if he did, like, do you want to live like that? So, yeah. So then we have Sonea. Let's go back to her. She's trying to study. I think she's in the library. And somebody is hovering an ink bottle above the pages of her book and is just dripping black drops onto it. And she sends out a flash of power. At once the ink sizzled and dried, and the ink bottle began to glow red. It shot away towards the shelves, and she heard a yelp. Smiling grimly, she looked down again, but her smile vanished as she saw the ink drying on the page. She drew out a nosecloth and dabbed at the spots. Then she muttered a curse as the ink spread. Yeah, so that doesn't help. And she is, like, upset because it's a library book. And Dorian's like, listen, it's busted. I'm sorry. I saw what happened, and good on you for, like, taking care of yourself, but this book has had it. And Rothen can have another copy made, which I should mention, like the fact that Dorian calls his father Rothen, I think is really weird. I'm just, maybe that's tradition. Maybe it's because like his father was already a teacher at the school when he began to attend. And so he got used to calling him by his proper title instead of my father because of him being a teacher. But yeah, she says, but it will cost money. And Dorian says, that's hardly a problem, Sonea. And then he realizes what it is that's bothering her and says, oh, you don't think it's fair for him to pay for it because you didn't damage it. And that's exactly what it is. And I like the fact that she's kind of startled that like he saw what happened and he's able to like understand her reluctance to like take this to Rothen. And he explains that when he was a novice himself, that he got bullied a lot as well, especially in his first year. And then says, before I say anything, you'd better tell me what they've done to you so far. I need to get an idea what these novices are like, particularly Regin, before I can help you. And I like this because I don't feel like she's... correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that Sonea has only told Rothen about 1 or 2 incidents. I'm pretty positive she hasn't like given him a blow-by-blow at the end of every day about what they did to her today. Because there's no way to tell these sorts of stories when they happen as often as they do without it being like you're complaining. And Sonea is not a complainer. She's just trying to get through this. And I feel like she just wouldn't want to give that impression to Rothen, whether or not that was like a reasonable way to handle it or not. So she tells him all about like how things got amped up and him framing her for stealing and then the ambush in the forest. And, then she tells him about how after the ambush, all of the like instructors and higher magicians were asking her questions that had nothing to do with the ambush. They were asking her if she was tired and whatnot. And Dorian is like, well, dude, they clearly want to know how you managed to stand up against a bunch of wizards at once. And they're gauging your strength. Like they want to know how you're doing this and are trying to decide whether your powers developed almost completely while you were young, and that's why they burst out the way that they did, or if you're going to continue to grow and maybe become as powerful as Lorlen. So that was why they were focused on that. And like, yeah, they punished Regin, but that wasn't the thing that like caught their attention. So what he thinks of doing, which is so good, is setting up Regin so that he gets caught planting something in her box that will make everything else that he's accused her of like suddenly be cast into doubt. Which is a really smart move. And I'm not sure. Well, all right. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry, guys. So let's see. They come up with this idea, but we don't actually see it enacted until a little bit later. So she followed him down the corridor of the novices' quarters. She caught a soft sound behind her and looked back over her shoulder. Regin was peering out from the open doorway of a room, his lips curled into a sly smile. So she is walking with him, and where he winds up taking her is the spring that heads the water supply for like the whole campus. And oh no, that's actually later. I forgot about this part. He takes her out to the roof. I forgot about this because they're still within the campus. And it's just like this amazing view, and it's a secret passage. And he tells her that like the way to get out, the locks respond to certain people's touch. And so not everybody can get out there. Sort of like a pass key. I was given access by Lady Vinara's predecessor, Lord Garin. After Mother died, he and I became friends of sorts. He was like an additional grandfather, I suppose. one who always was around to talk to me. He taught me when I decided to, and then this huge gust of wind comes up, and he uses this shield, and it's all very like romantic in a crude sort of way, just hanging out on the roof, a couple of kids, you know, and just the view of everything makes her realize like how much of her own country she's never even seen before. And they start talking about traveling and just like, I liked this moment actually, you know, it's something that sort of makes you, it represents, Abby's saying in the chat, roofs are always romantic in YA novels. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's meant to like represent seeing your future ahead of you, you know, being able to have like a wider perspective. And Sonea, you know, she's poor and she's never had a reason to like travel. She's never had the ability to travel. And she asks Dorian if he's ever been outside Karelia, but he hasn't either. And he says like that he's interested in going, but the village that he takes care of is very important to him, and he doesn't like leaving for too long because something could happen while he's gone and then they'll be screwed. So yeah, this is a nice moment, and we find out a little bit later too that he's actually really sympathetic to the slum dwellers, and it's just a nice moment of like him being more aware than his own father about stuff, because I think of working with the villagers and seeing people who have less and the way that this all like kind of shakes out. Rothen's a good guy, but you know, the conversation that she had with him when she first came to the guild, like he's a good person, but there are a lot of things that he doesn't think of that don't occur to him. And that's such a true thing of a lot of people who have the privilege of having stability in their lives and security, is that they don't think of a lot of the things that a person who has grown up without money has to think of. So it doesn't occur to them all of the little things that can happen that can cause you to spiral completely out of control and out of hope. And that's so true of so many people. And I feel like that's, just to get on a tiny soapbox for a second, I know that social media gets a lot of shit. I know that a lot of people are just like, well, you know, it's full of like false news, and it's full of bullshit, like, what's the word I want? Testimonials and garbage. And that's true, of course. I mean, when books were first invented, there are a lot of trash books. There still are. But the one thing that I think social media has been really good for is sharing experiences with people who don't experience them themselves. So it's led to a much better understanding amongst a lot more people what it's like to live in poverty, or what it's like to be targeted because of your race, or what it is like to like just pick an oppressed group. And there is a lot more circulation of experiences and like kind of journal entries or incidents or videos or things like this that I don't think everybody watching these videos who don't get it are necessarily bad people. I just think that it doesn't occur to you. I know it didn't occur to me a lot of the time, like 10 years ago. And now that I have learned to read and listen and watch and just be open to this stuff, now I'm really getting it a lot more. So I feel like that's where Rothen is that he's like a decent guy who wants to understand, but doesn't even realize that he can't understand yet. You know, he's not even quite there. So Dorian is sort of like a slightly improved version of Rothen, where, you know, is he still privileged? Of course, like for sure. But he's put himself into a situation where he's nearer to people every day that are not privileged than he is to his own social strata. And that leads him to understand better what their like priorities are, what their challenges are, and thus he can see what Curalia is really struggling with, which is just basically, there's like a class war, like low-key rumbling and starting. And he's on the side of the Dwells, which I don't think that Sonea ever expected. So they head down from the roof, and he teaches her how to levitate. He works on it with her, because she initially is kind of like, no, I'm not doing that right now. I have other work to do. But he's like, yeah, but if I teach you here, Regin's not here, and nobody's going to see you make any mistakes. She's like, all right, fine. All right, so I'm trying to find, oh yeah, this is a section with Tyann and Daniel that I already talked about pretty much. His conversation is so sad. Like, I heard about you and I realized it didn't matter whether the rumors were true or not. It was clear I could never be a magician. The guild would work out what I was and send me straight home. Daniel felt a strange, dull anger. With his impressive memory and sharp intellect, Tyann would have been a fine magician. Yeah, I like that Daniel's not only like just kind of bummed out for his friend, but also just thinking about like, yeah, and this person could have been such an asset if we weren't such idiots. And I think about that all the time. Like, you know, there's this infuriating argument that, I always just roll my eyes at when people are, anti-choice, and they talk about like, well, what if the baby that you aborted could have solved, like, you know, cured cancer or whatever, and you aborted the baby and now nobody will cure cancer. And I always think of people like this who, how many opportunities have we lost out on because we oppressed the person who could have done the right thing? How many folks could have cured cancer that we didn't give an education, and they lived and died never knowing that they had that potential in them? How many women were not allowed to go to a school? How many black people were not allowed to attend a certain school? And if they were allowed to attend any school, were not allowed to like partake in the same sorts of experiments or work in the same hospitals. You know, we shoot ourselves in the foot as human beings by not giving everyone the same opportunities, and by assuming that we know who has the potential based on arbitrary fucking nonsense. And it's really stupid of us, and it's incredibly limiting and just really like short-sighted and ignorant. And I can't help but wonder where we'd be as a society today if we had let everybody be who the fuck they are and let them all have access to the same opportunities. There's no telling. There really isn't, you know? So I like that moment. All right. So here comes the setup. Rothen is in the library, and he sees Dorian coming in with Sonea. And he's sort of like, well, what the fuck? Because Sonea had asked Rothen to get books for her, but then here she is in the library. So he's like, well, why'd you ask me then? You're here. So he's watching her, and she's got her box with her, which I'm going to call her backpack for the sake of simplicity, because calling it her box just makes me super uncomfortable. So I'm just going to stop. But she's got her backpack, and Lord Julian, who I think is like the librarian on duty, tells her to leave it on the shelves near the door. She leaves it there, and then Rothen, he's like, all right, well, she's here. This is weird, whatever, but I'm going to keep looking for the books that she asked for, and then I'll go catch up with her. He overhears somebody like coming up and talking to Lord Julian, asking for help. But then he sees that Dorian is chatting with Lord Galen in the next aisle. And a loud coughing started behind him, and he glanced behind to see Lord Garrel holding a nosecloth to his mouth. Then an exclamation drew his attention away. "Regin!" Galen barked, striding out into the aisle. Looking through the shelves, Rothen could see Regin standing next to Julian's desk. "Yes, my lord?" His expression was all innocence and puzzlement. "What did you just put in this box?" "What box, my lord?" Galen's eyes narrowed. "What is the problem, Lord Galen?" Lord Geralt strode down the aisle and approached Julian's desk. Now, I would like to register my frustration that their names are so similar, and it took me a little while to work this out, Galen and Geralt. But Galen is the reasonable person that Dorian was chatting with, and Dorian set it up so that Galen would be able to have a view of what Regin was doing. And Geralt is the one that is in charge of Regin, and apparently was kind of in on this whole thing. That's up for debate. I'm going to guess yes, he was. All right. I'm getting ahead. Rothen looked around to see magicians gathered in twos and threes watching this drama unfold. What is going on here? This is Sonea's. Is it? How very interesting. He repeated what he'd seen. Lord Julian's eyebrows dropped into a disapproving frown. Shall we see which of your possessions Regin has decided Sonea would dearly like to own? Regin paled. Rothen felt a smile spread over his face. He nearly yelped in surprise as a hand touched his shoulder. Turning, he found Dorian standing beside him, a familiar mischievous glint in his eyes. So they open the backpack, and there is a 200-year-old inkwell from Eileen that belongs to the librarian. It's super valuable, but it's really leaky, and him putting it in there has caused all of her notes to become smudged and worthless and ruined. And Geralt tries to be like, oh, he just wanted to ruin her notes, just a silly prank. Which, first of all, ruining someone's notes is not just a silly prank. Like, okay. Real quick sidebar. If any of you have read the book Little Women, if you haven't, it's going to be coming up for 2019 book club. But there is a part where somebody burns someone's book, a manuscript, handwritten, that they've been working on for like years. And that person is expected to forgive the other pretty quickly, which I think is the most bullshit thing ever. I really love Little Women, don't get me wrong, but that particular thing has always made me crazy because that is a heart and soul of work that you've destroyed. This is obviously not on that level. This is notes. This is a novel that you've been, but still, this is like, you didn't just ruin somebody's like ditto copies of something. You ruined their handwritten notes that they took during class, and now they don't have anybody to like go copy from because she's not friends with Porel anymore because he can't talk to her now. So this is not a prank, and it just made my hackles raise so much when he tries to frame it that way. And Galen says, I don't believe that's all it was, because if it were, he would simply have poured the contents all over her papers and left the inkwell on Lord Julian's desk. Geralt's expression darkened, but Galen's accusing stare remained steady. Lord Julian looked from one magician to the other, then up at the shelves. I like this moment a lot. Galen is like completely calling Geralt out. Geralt's trying to act like, oh, it's not a big deal, and Galen is like, fuck you, it's not a big deal. This is a piece of a bigger puzzle here, and I think you know that. And I think you're just worried that your precious little cinnamon roll is going to be exposed, and we're all going to realize that he's fucking bullying creep. I'm afraid your notes are ruined, Sonea. If you'd like, I'll lock your box in my cupboard from now on. She looked up at him, surprised. Thank you, Lord Julian, she said in a quiet voice. You may return to your studies, Sonea. Regin and I are going to have a chat with the university director. Galen eyed Geralt. Are you coming? Oh shit, I just really want to know what happened there. And Dorian afterwards is talking about how, like, this is the part where he's, like, talking about the fact that it may not have worked, but that he was pretty sure that Regin's just, like, kind of predictable and that he was going to do it. And then he says, did you notice who took Julian away from his desk and distracted everyone while Regin was doing his evil deed? Rothen thought back. Geralt? No, don't be ridiculous. Regin was taking advantage of the situation. Just because Geralt was the one who asked for help and coughed at the same moment Regin made his move doesn't mean he's involving himself in childish pranks. You're probably right, Dorian said, but I would keep an eye on him if I were you. You're probably right. No, you're not. You fucking... Rothen? Buddy? Pal? Have you learned nothing from what happened with Fergan? Seriously. You want to think the best of your fellow teachers. And I understand that impulse. I used to be the same way. I really did. This motherfucker has not learned a thing. Obviously, they were in cahoots here. Even if you didn't know for sure, even if you only saw the way that one moment went down and then you left, that is bad enough. But put it with, I saw the way that whole thing went down, and then I saw the aftermath where Geralt continually tried to minimize and downplay what Regin had done and act like he didn't deserve a punishment for it and that it was nothing. Those two things together should cement that for you, dude. Come on. This is obviously a shitty adult egging on a shitty child. And I don't know if Geralt has a problem with Rothen particularly, that he might also, there could be, what I'm saying is, Sonea being a dwell could just be a portion of it. And Geralt might not like Rothen and want to, mess up Rothen's reputation as well. I don't know. So anyway, I'm just infuriated with Rothen because, dude, this shit is transparent as fuck. And if you aren't seeing this now, I have serious doubts about, your adequacy as a fucking, guardian. So anyway, all right. So then goes the thing with Sonea and Dorian heading into the woods. And he's telling her about his life and about living in these villages and the fact that people like him, but they don't they're not comfortable around him, and being the only magician in an area is just really sort of isolating in a way. But also that he wouldn't trade what he does, that he thinks it's super important. And then he starts talking about the slums are part of a much bigger problem. They're if you'll forgive me saying so, boils on the skin of the city, pointing to deeper troubles in the body. The boils won't go away until the deeper problems are addressed. If I stick to my analogy, I'd say that the city has grown into a fat, sweet-sucking old warrior. He's either unaware or uncaring that his greedy habits are destroying the systems of his body, or that his paunch is making him ugly. He is already far from fit, but as he doesn't have any more enemies to worry about, he's happy to sit back and indulge himself. I'm not saying we shouldn't do anything because it's too big a problem. We should be doing something. Like what? He smiled. I don't want to spoil our walk by ranting and raving. Yo, how many times, my boyfriend's friend came over the other day and brought his girlfriend, and she's just starting to take political science in college, and started to ask me some questions, and I think that she was not ready for my answers. But I there are a couple things that it's a simple question that she asks, but the answer is not simple. And I just go off. And then after 15 minutes, I'm so that's why we need to burn it down. So yeah, Dorian, I really feel for you in this moment, dude. But yeah, this is when he brings her to the spring, the source of the guild's water. I used to start visiting as soon as the snows began to fall. And this is when he kisses her. And at first she sort of pulls away and isn't sure. And then she kisses him again. Or he kisses her again. And he says after that wasn't fair of him. Because I'm going away. Because you might want or need someone else between now and who knows when. And turn them away because of me. Sonea laughed a little bitterly. I doubt it. Dorian's gaze became wary. Sonea frowned. Did he now think she welcomed his attention only because she thought nobody else would ever be romantically interested in her? Excuse me. Really, I was surprised that was the way that she kind of wondered if he interpreted it, because when she said, I doubt it. What it sounded like to me was that she was like, oh, I'm not going to turn anybody away because of you. Ha, don't worry about it, buddy. Which I prefer, frankly. But I guess I could see how it could be taken either way. But yeah, so this is the beginning of a little bit of a thing. And Rothen actually approves of this, which I appreciated. That, like, he's not stupid enough to not see this happening. But also is, like, willing to tell her, like, you know what? This is probably pretty good. There's not even that big an age difference between you guys. But then she says, I don't mind you speculating, but I'd appreciate it if you did so privately. He frowned and looked at her in surprise. She kept her attention on the hall. As they stepped inside, the room echoed with the sound of rapid footsteps on the stairway treads. Looking up, Sonea glimpsed a familiar novice hurrying upward. Her stomach turned. She'd had a clear look at the expression on Regin's face before he slipped out of sight. She might have gained a begrudging sympathy from the teachers now that Regin had been caught setting her up as a thief, but she doubted she was free of his taunting. Preparations for the first-year tests had kept the boy occupied, but she suspected he was planning a particularly nasty revenge. I really gotta ask, like, when does Rothen do his own work? I mean, Regin. I feel like he's just haunting her steps all the fucking time. Get a life, dude. Like, honestly, this is a thing for me. It's like stalking and shit. You just have to have nothing else to do, and it's just so depressing to me that this is how people want to spend their time. Get a life. And I'm wondering if he, like, overheard this conversation and now is gonna, like, be a pain in the ass about Dorian, you know? So, she goes to class, hands in her assignment, and let's see. Today you will complete your first-year tests in warrior skills. But she gets interrupted and taken out of class because Rothen wants to see her, which really bummed me out because I just wanted to see how she did. I really want to know how she's doing. Well, guess what? This fucking High Lord is sitting in Rothen's rooms, and he knows everything. I could have fallen over. Guys, there's no way. What? How did he figure this out? Something's up. He's doing some other extra shit. I don't know what the fuck. But, yeah. He brings up the rumor concerning you and your novice, and they think that he means the rumor of Sonea and Rothen, like, having an affair. And then he says, I am referring to a rumor about my nocturnal activities. And Sonea's like, oh, fuck. So he wants to read both their minds to ensure that they have not told anybody else about what they know. And he reads Rothen's mind pretty easily and ensures what he wants to know. Rothen has not told anybody else, and that's fine. And then he wants to read Sonea's mind. And Rothen's like, dude, you just read mine. You know what you need to know. And he's like, I don't. Sonea might have told somebody. And Sonea's, like, really upset by the fact that Rothen kind of doesn't stand up for her here. I don't know what she wanted him to do, but I understand that feeling of just being like, God damn it, even though there really isn't a good option for them. And he is getting into her mind in a way that isn't the same as when Lorlen did it. It's just a really weird, like, there's not... When Lorlen got into her mind, she could sense that it was Lorlen. But the thing that's coming into her mind now does not seem to have the personality of the person, you know, like, which I find real creepy. And here's this weird moment where she starts to try and, like, cover up the memories that she has with other thoughts and images and just kind of, like, distract him and hide it that way. He is trying to get past it and, like, does something that actually really hurts her and causes her to scream, and then tells her to stop fighting. And then, like, it seems like he leafs through her memories like he's going through a fucking Rolodex. Like, just all of the things. And I highlighted that Senfel is the thieves' magician, who is the one that I had been theorizing might be the serial killer out there. But from the way the Dark Lord is responding to all of this right now, I gotta think he is the serial killer. Like, there's no other reason for him to act like this. And she sees the memory of her watching him through the window and everything that happened. And I like that there's like a flicker of annoyance from him that it was so easy for her to stumble on his secret, and that she found out like way before she even became a novice. Like, this was a really early piece of knowledge that she had. And he starts to push into other parts of her life because she thinks that all he wants to know is whether she's told anybody else. But then he like goes into her past, and tries to sense like her emotional attachment to various people in her mind so that he can exploit her. Essentially, he wants to know who means something to her so that he can manipulate her with that. And it's so hard to read because she's trying to hide it from him and she can't. Like, he's really good at figuring out what he needs to know. And he wants to know, would she expose him if she could? Yes, but only if she knew Rothen and the others would not be harmed. Then the presence vanished, and she felt the pressure against her temples stop. She opened her eyes and blinked. Akkarin had turned his back and was pacing slowly away from them. She felt Rothen's hands on her shoulders, steady and reassuring. "You would both expose me if you could," Akkarin said. He was silent for a time, then turned to face them. "I will claim Sonea's guardianship. Her abilities are advanced, and as Lorlen surmised, her strength is unusually high. No one will question my choice." Fuck, you guys. That sucks. It sucks so much. And poor Rothen, like, he's just wrecked over this. You know, like, this is the exact scenario. Not the exact scenario. Sonea could not have seen this coming. But this is, like, pretty close to what she had been the most worried about. It's, like, winding up a prisoner. And that's what's happening. And I feel so bad because Lorlen, like, assured her that that wouldn't happen, that they were doing everything they could. And again, the High Lord has said he got this out of Lorlen's mind. How? Does Lorlen know that he knows? Or has he been so stealthy that Lorlen isn't even aware? Guys, what about that fucking breeze, though? Remember that breeze in Lorlen's office? That was something. I'm telling you, something's happening with Lorlen. So, come along, Akkarin said. The novice's room in my residence hasn't seen an occupant in many years, but it has always been kept ready for one. You'll find it much more comfortable than those in the novice's quarters. That's the end of part 1. How many chapters is in part 2? Ooh, we got a good 17 chapters. So we got a lot left. Guys, I'm dying. I read this so fast. I was just so shocked. I really didn't expect this shit to come to a head that fast. There was no warning. I think that's really what it was, is that I expected if we were going to have like the High Lord figuring out that they know something, I figured that would happen after a few like weird near misses. And it turns out that like it's more that he's doing so much shit that nobody is even aware he can do, I think, is really what it is. That there can't be warning because nobody knows the signs to look for because he's doing magic that they aren't familiar with. So yeah, this is fucked up. And I want to know what happens next. I'm very excited. So yeah, thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this. Thank you to Abby and Melanie for coming to the crowdcast. And I'm going to have to be starting Parable of the Sower shortly, so I'm going to let you guys go. But you're all great, and I can't wait to do this again. So I'll see you soon with a new episode, hopefully. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.